Galactic powers mocked humans until Earth finally spoke. The stars had always seemed full of promise to humanity. But the truth turned out to be far more cruel than anyone had imagined. 300 years ago, the aliens came to Earth and everything changed forever. The Concord of 12 was what they called themselves, an alliance of the most powerful species in the known galaxy. And they had been watching humanity for a very long time before they decided to make contact. Ambassador Keth Voron of the Silithine hegemony was the one who first stood before the leaders of Earth, his body covered in shimmering scales that changed color with every movement, his eyes like crystals that seemed to look right through everyone. In the room he spoke words that sounded friendly, but carried poison underneath. "You are acceptable," he had said through the translation device around his neck. "The Concord extends membership to your species, and we will share our technology and trade routes with you." The humans had celebrated that day, thinking they had joined a family of equals among the stars. They were wrong. It took only a few years for humanity to understand the truth of their situation. And that truth was bitter and hard to swallow. The Concord did not see humans as partners or friends or even as worthy of basic respect to them. Humans were something between amusing pets and annoying insects, useful for cheap labor and entertaining stories, but never to be taken seriously. The technology they shared was always outdated by centuries, and the trade routes they offered were the dangerous ones that no other species wanted. When humans tried to expand their territory, they found invisible walls everywhere, boundaries that the Concord species had drawn long ago and refused to explain. When human ships accidentally crossed those boundaries, they were seized and their crews imprisoned for years without trial. When humans complained, the Concord laughed and told them to be grateful for what they had. 300 years of this treatment had left deep scars on the human spirit. Commander Elena Vasquez knew those scars well because she had spent her entire life feeling them. She stood now at the viewport of Terran Station 7, a small outpost at the edge of human space, watching a massive alien warship drift past like a mountain made of metal and malice. The ship belonged to the Krethkai, one of the most aggressive species in the Concord, beings that looked like giant wasps crossed with nightmares, all hard shells and clicking mandibles and compound eyes that showed no mercy. "Commander," said Lieutenant Park from his station, his voice tight with worry, "the dreadnought is not on any scheduled patrol route, and they are heading directly for us." Elena felt her stomach drop, but kept her face calm because her crew needed her to be strong. Even when she felt anything but strong. "Open a channel," she ordered. The main screen flickered, and suddenly the face of a Krethkai admiral filled the display, his mandibles clicking in a pattern that the translator turned into words dripping with contempt. "Terran Station 7. You are harboring criminals who fled from Krethkai justice, and you will surrender them immediately or face the consequences." Elena knew exactly who he meant 4 hours ago. A small human freighter called the Wandering Star had limped into their docking bay with its hull scarred, and its crew terrified. They had made a simple navigation error and crossed into a Krethkai exclusive zone without knowing it even existed, because the Krethkai changed those boundaries whenever they felt like it, and never bothered to inform anyone. Crew had panicked when Krethkai patrol ships started firing on them, and they had run for the nearest human outpost, which happened to be Station 7. Now an entire dreadnought had come to collect them, which was like using a sledgehammer to kill a fly. "Admiral," Elena said carefully, choosing every word with precision, "the Wandering Star is a civilian vessel with no military value, and the crew made an honest mistake that harmed no one. So perhaps we could discuss a reasonable solution that does not involve you will surrender them." The Admiral interrupted, his mandibles clicking faster now. "Or we will come aboard and take them ourselves. and anyone who interferes will be considered an enemy of the Krethkai Dominion. Admiral, please, these are innocent people who... You have 1 hour. Human, the screen went dark. Elena stood very still for a long moment, feeling the weight of 300 years pressing down on her shoulders. This was how it always went. The Concord species made demands and humans obeyed because they had no choice. Because human technology was centuries behind. Because a single Krethkai dreadnought could destroy every ship Earth possessed. Without breaking a sweat, she thought about the crew of the Wandering Star. 7 people, including 2 children, hiding in their damaged ship and waiting to learn their fate. She thought about all the other humans who had been handed over to alien justice systems that did not recognize human rights or human dignity. She thought about her grandfather, who would spend 20 years in a Silithine prison for a crime he did not commit, and who had come home a broken man who never smiled again. "Commander," Park said quietly, "what are your orders?" Elena turned away from the viewport and looked at her crew, at their frightened faces and their trembling hands, at the hope in their eyes that maybe this time would be different, even though it never was. "Contact Earth Command," she said. "Tell them what is happening and ask for guidance. And the Wandering Star crew, tell them to stay calm and stay hidden. And tell them that we have not given up on them yet." Park nodded and turned to his console. But Elena could see the doubt in his eyes. She shared that doubt because she had seen this story play out too many times before. Humans asked for help, and the galaxy laughed. Humans begged for mercy, and the galaxy turned away. Humans dreamed of respect, and the galaxy reminded them of their place, but somewhere deep inside her chest, in a place she had almost forgotten existed, a tiny spark of defiance still burned. Maybe this time would be different. Maybe Earth would finally say something other than sorry. Maybe after 300 years of silence, humanity would finally find its voice. She did not truly believe it, but she held on to that spark anyway, because hope was all she had left. The hour began to count down, and the dreadnought waited in the darkness like a predator certain of its prey. Galactic powers mocked humans until Earth finally spoke deep beneath the mountains of Switzerland, in a place that appeared on no map and existed in no official record. Director Marcus Chun sat alone in his office and read the same report he had read 10,000 times before. The numbers told a day's story that would have shocked the entire galaxy if anyone outside this facility had known it existed. For 312 years, humanity had kept a secret so big that it made every other secret in history look like a child's game. Wow. The Concord watched and laughed at human technology that seemed stuck in the past, while alien ambassadors made jokes about primitive Earthships that still used ancient engines, while the galaxy congratulated itself on keeping the humans properly contained and controlled. Something else had been happening in the shadows humanity had been building. Director Chun rose from his desk and walked through corridors that stretched for miles underground, past laboratories filled with equipment that would make Concord scientists weep with confusion and envy, past manufacturing bays where machines worked day and night producing things that should not have been possible. He had spent his entire life in this place, as had his father and his grandfather before him. The project had no official name because officially it did not exist. But the people who worked here called it the Long Silence, because that was what humanity had been doing for 3 centuries, staying silent while they prepared to speak. Chun entered the main hangar and stopped to look at what waited there. Rows upon rows of ships that stretched beyond sight. Vessels that did not look like anything the galaxy had ever seen. They were sleek and angular and somehow wrong to look at, as if they existed at an angle to normal reality, as if the universe itself was not entirely sure they belonged. These ships did not use the slow and clumsy engines that the Concord had given humanity permission to use. These ships moved through space in ways that the oldest and wisest species in the galaxy had never imagined possible, and the weapons they carried were something else entirely. Devices that operated on principles so advanced that explaining them to a Concord scientist would be like explaining fire to a fish. Director Chun. He turned to find a young officer approaching with a tablet clutched in nervous hands. "We have received an alert from Terran Station 7, the officer said. "The Krethkai are demanding that we surrender the crew of a human freighter, and they have given us 1 hour to comply." "I am aware," Chun replied calmly. "Sir, the Council is asking for your recommendation. And if we refuse the Krethkai demand, they might actually attack this time, because they have been looking for an excuse to remind us of our place." Chun smiled, but it was not a warm expression. "Tell me something, Lieutenant. Do you know why we have waited so long to reveal what we have built here?" The officer hesitated before answering. "The strategic assessments indicated that we needed to wait until we had overwhelming capability, until there was no chance of failure. That is what we tell ourselves." "Yes, but the real reason is different." Chun turned back to face the hangar, to look upon the ships that represented 3 centuries of hidden labor and secret genius and patient determination. "We waited because we had to be certain that we were not the villains in this story. We had to give them every possible chance to treat us with basic dignity. We had to know that when we finally acted, it would be from necessity rather than pride or anger or wounded ego." He pulled up a holographic display that floated in the air between them, and data began to scroll past in an endless stream. "This is every recorded incident between humanity and the Concord species over the past 300 years. Every human ship impounded without cause. Every human colony forced to relocate at alien whim. Every human citizen imprisoned for breaking laws that did not exist until that very day. Every insult and humiliation and cruelty, both large and small. The numbers were staggering, tens of thousands of incidents documented with careful precision. Each one cataloged and time-stamped and filed away in databases that the Concord did not know existed. We gave them 300 years to show us one moment of genuine respect," Chen said quietly. "One single instance of treating us as partners rather than pets. One tiny gesture of acknowledging that we had worth beyond our usefulness to them." He closed the display with a wave of his hand. "They never did. Not once in 300 years. And that is why we can do what must be done with clear consciences and steady hands." The officer swallowed hard. "What are your orders?" "Director." Chun walked to a console and entered a series of codes that he had memorized decades ago. Codes that would wake systems sleeping since before he was born all around the hangar. Lights began to flicker on as ships came alive for the first time. "Tell the Council that Director Chun recommends we stop smiling and stop bowing and stop pretending to be less than we are." He looked up at the nearest vessel, at its strange hull that seemed to shimmer with contained power, at the weapons ports that could reshape reality itself. "Tell them that the long silence is over." Across the facility, alarms began to sound as personnel rushed to stations they had trained for their entire lives, but never truly believed they would use in orbit above Earth. Hidden behind shields that made them invisible to every sensor the Concord possessed, thousands of ships began to power up their engines in bases scattered across the solar system, concealed in asteroids and buried beneath moons. Millions of soldiers checked their weapons and said quiet prayers, and in the depths of space, moving toward Terran Station 7 at speeds that should have been impossible. The first fleet of humanity's hidden armada, prepared to deliver a message 300 years in the making. The galaxy had laughed at humanity. For so long it was time for humanity to have the last laugh. Director Chen watched the ships rise from the hangar floor and felt something he had not felt in years. Hope, not hope that things might get better someday, but certainty that they would get better today. because humanity had earned this moment through centuries of patient suffering, and they would not waste. If the Krethkai wanted an answer from Earth, they were about to get one. Galactic powers mocked humans until Earth finally spoke the Kreth Kai Admiral had given them 1 hour, and Commander Elena Vasquez had spent 47 minutes of that hour staring at the dreadnought through her viewport. She knew what was coming, because she had seen it happen before. The demands and the threats, and then the surrender, because humanity always surrendered in the end. Her crew worked around her in tense silence, running system checks that everyone knew were meaningless because Terran Station 7 had exactly 4 defensive turrets, and the dreadnought had enough firepower to crack a small moon in half. Commander Lieutenant Park said with a trembling voice, 30 minutes remaining, and Earth Command still has not responded to our request for guidance. They have responded, Elena replied without turning from the viewport. They are just not telling us what they decided. She heard her crew shifting nervously behind her and understood their fear because she felt it too. That terrible helplessness that came from being prey in a universe full of predators. Then every alarm on the station screamed at once. Contact! Park shouted while his hands flew across his console. Multiple contacts emerging from nowhere, and, Commander, I do not understand what I am seeing. Elena spun around and looked at the main display. The dreadnought was still there, but now it was not alone. Ships were appearing around it, not dropping out of faster than light traveled the way normal vessels did, but simply existing where nothing had existed a moment before. Dozens of them at first, then hundreds. Elena felt her heart stop because she recognized the emblems on those ships. They were human, but nothing else about them made any sense, because they were too fast and too sleek, and their hulls seemed to shimmer and shift as if reality itself was uncertain about them. Terran Station 7. A calm voice came through the communication system. This is Admiral Yuki Tanaka of the TDF Awakening, and you can stand down now because we will handle this situation. The lead vessel glided forward with impossible grace, positioning itself directly between the station and the Krethkai. Dreadnought Elena realized with shock that it was roughly the same size as the alien warship. She had not known that humanity could build anything that large. She had not known that humanity could build anything like this at all. Krethkai vessel. Admiral Tanaka broadcast on all frequencies so that everyone in the system could hear. You have made demands of a human station, and you have threatened human citizens, and you have exactly one opportunity to withdraw peacefully. A long silence stretched across the void. Then the Krethkai Admiral responded with mandibles clicking in fury. You dare to threaten the Krethkai Dominion with your pathetic toys. We will destroy you and your station and every human in this system, and then you will listen. Admiral Tanaka interrupted. Something happened to the dreadnought. Elena could not process what her eyes were telling her, because one moment the alien ship was whole, and the next moment a perfect sphere of its hull simply ceased to exist, not destroyed, not vaporized, not blown apart, just gone, as if that section of the ship had never been there at all. The dreadnought tumbled wildly as atmosphere vented from the impossible wound, emergency lights flickering across its surface while escape pods began launching in panic. That was a warning shot. Admiral Tanaka continued in a voice as calm as still water. All weapons do not destroy in the way you understand destruction, because they unmake, and your vessel now has approximately 3 hours before complete structural failure, so I suggest you use that time to evacuate. Elena watched as the other Krethkai ships in the system, 12 more warships that had been holding position at the edge of sensor range, turned and fled at maximum speed. They did not even try to fight. They did not even try to rescue their admiral. They simply ran. All Concord vessels in this system. Tanaka broadcast. This space is now under the protection of the Terran Defense Force, and any hostile action against human assets will be met with immediate response, and I strongly recommend that you inform your governments of what you have witnessed here today. The communication channel closed. Elena stood frozen at her station, her mind struggling to accept what had just happened around her. The bridge crew stared at their displays in stunned silence. Lieutenant Park was the first to speak. "Commander," he whispered, "did we just win?" Elena did not answer because she did not trust her voice. For 30 years, she had served in the Terran Defense Force, and in all that time, she had never once seen humanity stand up to the Concord and not be immediately crushed for their defiance. But now, a Krethkai dreadnought was tumbling through space with a wound that physics said should not be possible, and human ships that should not exist were holding formation around her station. And somewhere out there, the most aggressive species in the galaxy was running away in terror. A new transmission came through, this one on a private channel. "Commander Vasquez," Admiral Tanaka said, "I apologize for the delay in our response, but we wanted to make sure we had enough ships in position to send the right message." Elena finally found her voice. "Admiral, what is happening? Where did these ships come from? How is any of this possible?" "Those are excellent questions, and you will receive full answers soon. But for now, please know that the crew of the Wandering Star is safe and will remain safe, and no human will ever be surrendered to Concord justice again." Elena felt tears forming in her eyes and did not bother to hide them. 300 years, she said softly. "We waited 300 years. Yes, we did," Tanaka replied. "And now the waiting is over because Earth has finally decided to speak, and the galaxy is going to listen whether they want to or not." The channel closed. Elena turned back to her viewport and looked at the human fleet spread across the stars, at ships that represented centuries of secret work and hidden genius and patient determination. After 300 years of silence, humanity had found its voice, and what a voice it was. Galactic powers mocked humans until Earth finally spoke. The Concord of 12 gathered in emergency session for the first time in 400 years, and the mood in the Grand Chamber was something between terror and outrage. The chamber itself had been designed to intimidate visitors with its massive scale. A vast amphitheater filled with floating platforms that held delegations from each member species, arranged in careful order, with the oldest and most powerful at the center where the lighting was best and the acoustics perfect. For 300 years, the human delegation had occupied the smallest platform at the very edge of the chamber, positioned where the lights were dim and voices barely carried. Today, that platform was empty. Ambassador Kethforan of the Silithine hegemony looked at that vacant space with eyes that flickered between confusion and anger. "They refused to attend," he said to his aide. "After everything they have done, they actually refused to face the judgment of the Concord." "They did not exactly refuse," the aide replied in a voice barely above a whisper. "They said they would speak when they were ready, and that the Concord should use the waiting time to consider its position." Murmurs rippled through the chamber as delegates from a dozen species processed those words. The Krethkai delegation clicked their mandibles in fury, while the massive Thordani rumbled displeasure from their reinforced platform, and the crystalline Vethnar chimed with notes of alarm. "Their position," the Krethkai High Admiral shouted as he rose from his seat. "They attacked the Krethkai warship, and they possess weapons that violate 17 Concord treaties, and they have hidden military capabilities for 300 years while pretending to be weak, and their position is that of criminals awaiting execution. And yet here we all are." The voice came from everywhere and nowhere at once, calm and measured and completely unafraid. The human platform flickered, and suddenly it was no longer empty. A single figure stood there, A woman in an admiral's uniform, with silver hair and a bearing that showed no trace of the submission the Concorde had come to expect from humans. Admiral Yuki. Tanaka looked out at the assembled powers of the galaxy and did not flinch. Behind her, a holographic display came to life, showing streams of data that moved too fast for most species to follow. For 312 years, Tanaka said, humanity has kept careful records of every interaction with the Concorde, every treaty signed and every treaty broken, every promise made and every promise ignored, every human citizen detained without cause, every human colony forced to relocate, every human ship seized for violations of laws that changed without warning. The display shifted, and suddenly numbers filled the chamber. Statistics and dates and names and incidents that painted a picture of systematic cruelty. We calculate that the Concorde owes humanity approximately 47 trillion credits in reparations according to your own legal frameworks, Tanaka continued. And we have identified 6,412 individuals from various member species who have committed what your laws define as crimes against sentient beings. She paused to let those numbers sink in. We will not be collecting these debts. Silence fell across the chamber as the delegates tried to understand what they were hearing. We are not here for revenge, Tanaka said. And we are not here to replace the Concorde with a human empire, or to grind your species beneath our boots, the way you ground us beneath yours. She stepped forward on the platform, and her voice hardened. We are here to inform you that the terms of humanity's relationship with the galaxy have changed permanently, and there is nothing you can do to change them back. Ambassador Kethvorin found his voice at last. You cannot simply rewrite the rules of galactic civilization because you have built some impressive weapons. The Concorde has stood for 10,000 years, and in all those years you never once encountered a species like us. Tanaka interrupted. A species that was willing to endure 3 centuries of humiliation while quietly preparing for this moment. A species that played weak while building strength. A species that let you laugh at us while we learned everything we needed to know about you. She gestured and the display changed again, showing the true scope of humanity's hidden power ships beyond counting spread across the screen. Fleets stationed throughout the galaxy in positions that should have been impossible to reach without detection weapons. Platforms hidden in asteroids and moons and the empty spaces between stars, manufacturing facilities that dwarfed anything the Concorde had ever built. You watched. Yes, for 300 years, Tanaka said. And you saw exactly what we wanted you to see. Primitive humans struggling with technology centuries out of date. Primitive humans begging for scraps of respect. Primitive humans who pose no threat to anyone. She smiled, and it was not a friendly expression. You never once asked what we were doing when you were not watching. The Krethkai High Admiral stepped forward with mandibles clicking in defiance. Pretty pictures and bold words do not change the fact that you are one species against 12. If the Concorde decides to unite against you, then we will defeat you, Tanaka said simply. Not because we want to, but because we can, and because we will not allow anyone to threaten humanity ever again. She let that statement hang in the air before continuing. But we would prefer a different outcome. We would prefer to join a Concorde that treats all species as equals. We would prefer to share our technology and our knowledge and our resources with partners who respect us. Her voice softened slightly. You had 300 years to offer us that respect, and you chose not to. So now we will demonstrate what equality looks like, and you will adapt because you have no other choice. She looked around the chamber at the delegates who had spent centuries looking down on humanity. Welcome to the new galaxy. We hope you will be happier in it than we were in yours. The human platform flickered again, and Admiral Tanaka vanished as suddenly as she had appeared. leaving the Concord of 12 alone with the ruins of their assumptions and the dawning realization that everything they thought they knew about humanity had been wrong. The galaxy would never be the same. Galactic powers mocked humans until Earth finally spoke. 6 months had passed since humanity revealed its true strength to the galaxy, and everything had changed in ways both large and small. Commander Elena Vasquez stood on the observation deck of Terran Station 7, which had transformed from a forgotten outpost into one of the busiest ports in the entire sector. Ships from a dozen different species came and went at all hours. Traders and diplomats and scientists and curious visitors who wanted to see humans up close. These strange beings who had fooled the entire galaxy for 300 years. "Commander," Lieutenant Park said as he approached with a tablet in his hands, "the Silithine delegation is requesting another meeting to discuss technology exchange, programs, and cultural integration initiatives." Elena smiled at words that would have been unthinkable just 6 months ago. "Tell them I will be there in 15 minutes. Park nodded and left. And Elena turned back to the viewport to watch the traffic flowing through her Station A. Krethkai trading vessel was docking at one of the lower bays, its crew carefully following every protocol and treating the human dock workers with elaborate courtesy. The Krethkai had changed more than any other species since humanity revealed itself. They had attempted 2 retaliatory strikes in the first month, sending their finest warships against human positions in hopes of proving that the display at Station 7 had been some kind of trick. Both attacks had ended the same way, with Krethkai ships disabled and their crews rescued by human vessels, and returned home unharmed with a polite suggestion that they not try again after the second failure. The Krethkai government had quietly sued for peace and begun the long process of learning to treat humans as equals rather than prey. Other species had adapted in their own ways. The Thordani had tried to form a coalition against Earth, reaching out to every Concord species with warnings about the human threat and proposals for united action. They had been surprised to discover that most of the smaller species in the Concord were not interested in fighting humanity at all. 300 years of watching the powerful bully the weak had created a lot of resentment, and many species saw humanity's rise as an opportunity rather than a threat. The coalition had collapsed before it began, and the Thordani had reluctantly accepted the new reality. The Concord itself still existed in some form, though it looked very different from the organization that had dominated the galaxy for millennia. The old power structures had been swept away, and new treaties had been written that actually protected the rights of all species rather than just the strongest ones. Human representatives had been offered positions at the center of the reformed Concord, the seats of honor that had once belonged to the Silithine and the Krethkai admiral. Tanaka had politely declined. "We did not do this to become what they were," she had told Elena during one of their rare private conversations. "We did not endure 3 centuries of suffering just to turn around and make others suffer in the same way." Elena had wondered if humanity could really resist that. Temptation power changed people, and it changed civilizations. And there were plenty of humans who wanted revenge for what had been done to them and their ancestors. She had heard the angry speeches and seen the protests and read the opinion pieces calling for humanity to take its rightful place as rulers of the galaxy. But she had also seen something else. She had seen human doctors traveling to Krethkai worlds to help with medical emergencies that had nothing to do with Earth. She had seen human engineers working alongside Silithine technicians to rebuild infrastructure damaged by natural disasters. She had seen human teachers in schools on a dozen different planets, sharing knowledge freely with anyone who wanted to learn. Perhaps that was the real message that humanity had been waiting 300 years to deliver, not a message of power or vengeance or domination, but a message of what civilization could look like when the strong chose to help the weak instead of crushing. Thema new ship appeared at the edge of the system. emerging from faster-than-light travel in a flash of light that Elena still found beautiful even after seeing it thousands of times. This ship was different from the others, though its hull bore the combined emblems of Earth and 3 former Concord species. The first joint exploration vessel in galactic history, crewed by humans in Silithine and Vethanar and even a few Krethkai, who had volunteered for the mission. They were heading for regions of space that none of their species had ever mapped. Going together to discover things that none of them could have found alone, Elena watched the ship orient itself and prepare for the long journey ahead. And she thought about everything that had brought them to this moment. 300 years of patience and suffering and secret work. 300 years of smiling through insults and bowing through humiliations and pretending to be less than they. Or 300 years of keeping the faith that someday things would change. And now, they had changed. Not through conquest or destruction, but through the simple demonstration that strength and mercy could exist together. That power did not have to mean cruelty. That the victims of injustice did not have to become perpetrators of it when their turn came. The exploration ship vanished into the darkness between stars. Carrying its mixed crew toward unknown wonders, Elena thought about her grandfather, who had spent 20 years in a Silithine prison for a crime he did not commit. She thought about all the humans who had suffered and died without ever seeing this. She hoped that somehow they knew that their suffering had not been in vain, that the patience they had shown and the faith they had kept had led to something worth waiting for. "Commander," the gum system crackled with a young officer's voice. "The Silithine delegation is getting impatient." Elena smiled and turned away. "From the viewport, tell them I am on my way." She walked through corridors that were now filled with beings from across the galaxy. All of them treating each other with something like respect. All of them part of a new order that humanity had made possible. The galaxy had mocked humans for 300 years now. It was learning a different lesson about what humans truly were. A species of patience and determination and hope. A species that had never stopped believing that things could be better, even when all evidence suggested otherwise, and perhaps most importantly, a species that had finally spoken after 300 years of silence, and oh, what a story they had to tell.